Very glad to welcome Inez Nomidis, who's an executive with Air Inc., based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Air Inc. is well known as a research organization relevant to corporate talent mobility. Recently, they produced a survey, a corporate survey about COVID-19 and how it's impacting talent mobility management. Let's welcome Inez Nomidis, who's going to teach us about that. Hello, this is Ed Cohen, your broadcast host on Global TV, service of globalbusinessnews.net. Our special guest today is Inez Nomidis. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. She's with Air Inc., based in Boston, and we're going to be talking about the new now, and here we are with COVID. So Air Inc. did a survey, a corporate survey, and she's going to talk with us about some of the results, and we're going to have a brief conversation. So let's welcome Inez. Hello.
Hi, Ed. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. So tell us about your role at Air Inc., and then I want you to also talk to us about yourself and how long have you been with Air Inc., and how did you get to Air Inc.?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, happy to. So I'll start with the company. So Air Inc. was founded in 1954. It's based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, just down the road from Harvard University. The company focuses solely on mobility, and we are a consultancy, data, and technology firm. And we do numerous projects for clients and data related to cost of living, housing, airfare, hardship, anything that global companies sending people abroad would need to get their populations in a location, pay them appropriately, et cetera.
Yeah, and what did you do before being at Air Inc.?
So my own journey is quite twisty-turny, but I was an X-ray tech actually before I joined Air Inc. I joined the company in 2006 as a cost of living surveyor. So those are the individuals that actually go and gather the data, the pricing information that we collect. And so I joined because that was a really exciting opportunity to see the world, right? As a 20-something-year-old, there's really nothing quite like it. So, but prior to that, yeah, I was an X-ray tech in Rhode Island.
Oh, that's interesting. So I used to live in Boston, and I grew up in neighboring Brookline.
Yes.
But for the last 10 years that I was in Boston, I lived in the Prudential Center.
Okay.
And my office was on State Street, right adjacent to Faneuil Hall Marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
We were at 114 State Street for a number of years. Yeah, and so I moved to LA in a long time ago, in 1980, and was publishing California-bound relocation guides, which was a destination recruitment tool.
Gotcha, yeah.
Used by all the companies, and our partner was the LA Chamber of Commerce.
Mm-hmm.
And they bought thousands of copies across the years. And we had a reply card system and a 1-800-US bound number. And so we actually did DSP services. I didn't know what it was at the time.
Right.
We're just helping people settle in or get connected to realtors or bankers or schools or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
And so here we are today. So the survey, tell us about the survey. When was it done? Generally speaking, who were the participants?
Sure. So I should say that the role I have in the company is part of the advisory group. So I say that because this was part of the consulting arm of Air Inc. We have a benchmarking team, and they're the ones responsible for doing these surveys and benchmarks that you're talking about. And it was specifically about COVID-19 and how companies were reacting to the pandemic, as far as, were they evacuating employees? Weren't they? Were they providing additional benefits? Weren't they? Were they giving employees the option to leave their assignment locations or not? And who was approving that? So all the different factors that mobility functions were dealing with, grappling with as a result of this pandemic. We ran it in late March, and we closed it in early April and published it April 15th, formally tax day. 134 companies, participated, and these are all very large global organizations that participate, typically people that have large expat populations. So, 50 people abroad or more. So it's a pretty big group with, uh, all name brand sort of companies.
Right. And so tell me, was it the HR people or just the mobility manager, or was it a C-suite?
They're mobility directors typically that completed the survey.
Okay. And so they were happy to share their ideas and participation.
Yes, I generally find that the mobility industry is an open industry as far as looking to share information and wanting to learn from one another. Many of the folks that come into these roles come in from other areas of HR or compensation. And so, there is a hunger for information and data, which is why I think our benchmarks are popular.
Okay, so are companies interested to have people back in an office situation?
That's a great question. It really depends. So this was part of a different survey that we did, but coming back to the office versus working from home, there's a lot of complicated issues around that, right? So for example, if you are on an assignment in London and your visa is going to run out, and you were supposed to come home a month or two ago, that's a compliance risk, right? For an organization, they might want to get you home as soon as possible, but that might not be feasible, right? For the different travel restrictions and everything that
Right.
are going on. So there was an interesting divide. Most companies left their people in place. So 60% of the organization said that their assignments are continuing on as normal, meaning they left people in place, but everybody stopped new initiations. So they're not sending anybody immediately, or they weren't. I think that's starting to let up a little bit. But for the most part, there were a number of organizations that let the employee decide if they wanted to come back, but they didn't come back to the office. They're working from home.
So I read somewhere recently that some people who were quote unquote stuck somewhere on assignment actually have found it like a breath of fresh air, and they're rediscovering themselves, and they're learning more about the area where they're stationed without the pressures of day-to-day work.
Mm-hmm.
Did that come up at all? Probably not.
That didn't come up because this was from the mobility functions perspective, and I'm sure that is happening for some folks, and I'm happy for their positive experience. It is still a risk for the companies, right? And also one of the questions we asked was, are you continuing with allowances? Right? So there's all this housing that has to be paid for, the goods and services allowance, education, if kids' education is still, being paid for. So the company has to consider all of that in making the decision whether they want to evacuate somebody or leave them there. And we did see a number of companies cut assignments short. So they'll look at the books and say, this person's supposed to come home in September, but we're going to repatriate them back in March when they had the opportunity to, and just end the assignment early or have them finish their work from home. So there was a lot of that, and it was really a case-by-case basis, and you're thinking all these expats all over the world, huge populations, and to have to comb through all that information and decide what's going to happen. It was a big effort.
Not bad. Talk about disruption.
Yeah.
What if they rented out their home to somebody else, or they have no place to go to?
Exactly right. Yeah. One of the things is companies were giving temporary living. So if they did evacuate someone to come back home, that person might be renting out their home. They might have sold their home. And
Right.
so a number of companies, somewhere between 20 and 30%, we found were providing temporary living for that person that got back home.
So just imagine that with kids too.
Oh, I can't imagine. It's hard enough for people that are just working from home with
Oh my
kids,
God.
let alone having to, repatriate.
Yeah, right. Okay, so what were, in your opinion, what were some of the shocks, the surprises that came out of your survey result?
Now, I was actually surprised that as many people kind of left people in place And, we asked this question, the survey, again, it was in March when things were just sort of going on lockdown, and there was still an air of discretion, like you could decide if you wanted to travel back, and then suddenly you couldn't because all the airports were shut. But I was surprised by the high number. It was around 60% of companies that left people in position, right? But, when you think about it, it's not so surprising because they didn't really have protocol to get them out. I mean, almost every mobility function has an evacuation policy for medical emergencies, or when there were protests in Hong Kong, recently, they would, think about evacuating people. But those are very focused situations, right? It's happening in a region or a country or a city, but this was global. So the scope of it, the scale was just, unheard of, and nobody had a pandemic policy. So I think that was interesting. The fact that I expected more people to provide things like temporary living when they let someone come back home, those numbers were lower than I thought that they would have been. And just, the scale of needing to put something into place. So people sort of scrambling to say, what are we going to do for remote work? What are we going to do for taxes? What are we going to do? That sort of bit, I think, took everybody by surprise.
Headaches, wow. But what do you think is going to, this is just off the wall question, what do you think is going to be a result going forward relative to policy and practice?
Well, I can tell you what we're experiencing in the market. Many of our clients are asking for help to establish more formal work from home or remote work policies. And those are complex because you're looking at multiple tax jurisdictions, potentially, and immigration. If somebody wants to say, like you mentioned, oh, I've been enjoying living in this country, maybe
Right.
I want to keep working from here, right?
Right.
So you've got to sort those issues out. So we've seen an uptick in requests for formalizing that kind of policy. And then something that doesn't really concern Air Inc., but from a corporate perspective, we're seeing more companies establish teams that are cross-functional to deal with this kind of issue in case another global pandemic happens, to know who are the people that are part of the team that makes these decisions, approvals, policies, exceptions, etc. So that's what I think is happening now, and will continue to happen, in the near future.
Fascinating. So things are good with Air Inc. I understand that the company was sold last year, or was it the
It
year
might be
before?
2 years now. Yeah, it might be a
Yeah.
few years now. Yeah, we are a part of a Relo company that is based in Japan. So we are a subsidiary of that organization. Mhm.
So I know of some people who have worked as consultants to Japanese corporations who
Mhm.
relocate staff. And it seems to be that the Japanese companies take a different look at mobility in terms of preparation of the expat and family
Mhm.
before they go out on assignment. Language, culture, uh, fitting in with the new society. And so in other words, they mitigate their own risks by anticipating the problems and working them through in advance, so that when the assignee hits the ground, they run. They don't have any problems or any usual relocation problems. Is that your knowledge?
My experience with Japanese-based companies and mobility is that they do have unique or country-specific approaches, policies, or practices for moves in and out of Japan. So I have seen some degree of that, and it does seem to differ from what we see in other either global approaches or other regional approaches. There does seem to be more of a I don't know, not hand holding, but a real comprehensive level of support that they will offer for their moving employees.
Well, this is really a great conversation. I'm learning a lot from you. So before we close, tell me about what you're working on next.
Sure. Well, we just finished a video project that was really cool for a tech company, and that's to help sort of set expectations for employees. So we developed a video that kind of just tells the employee what to expect and set expectations, tell them the team that's going to be supporting them. We're doing a lot of that now, which is communications around mobility. Mobility as an industry has been moving more towards having more self-service, more autonomy, more flexibility.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's great. I mean, I think the generations that are coming up are looking for that. They want choice. They want freedom. But we need to support that with really good communications. And so we're doing a lot of that these days. And then other work that we're doing a lot of M&A, merger acquisition work. So companies that are buying other companies, looking to fold their mobility programs together, harmonize them, or make something new that meets the new organization's needs. So I see a lot of that happening as well. And then just as always with Air Inc., we're always doing a lot of custom data solutions for our clients. So if they're trying to do something unique for their organization or their people, just helping them realize that, either building a tool or a calculator or something like that, that gets them, to realize that dream.
Looking ahead, and this is just an off-the-wall question, the concept of reshoring, in other words, companies who are manufacturing in China or India or someplace else, there's a lot of talk about the supply chain issues and long distance and reshoring or redeveloping manufacturing inside the US, perhaps in lower cost areas where the younger generation could afford to live better, maybe bigger homes outside of urban areas, particularly if the pandemic problem doesn't go away.
Right.
We move out of urban areas into whether it's inland California or north of Texas, North Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Midwest, central locations, lower cost. So is Air beginning to focus some energy, research on this aspect of business, which seems like it's going to happen?
Well, we are, it's a great question because, I feel like every few years, the information about what people are trending to do with home buying or where they want to live seems to change. And it's all obviously reacting to the economy or pandemics and things like that. Because I read a report a few years ago, I think it was the Washington Post or something, that said that everybody wants to live in urban centers, and the suburbs were shrinking and people were moving back in, especially older folks. They were retiring and moving in right. So there's always this back and forth, this ebb and flow of trends, and we are seeing a lot of activity in the domestic space now. So we are addressing those needs with surveys and data and paying a lot of attention to that. So that is something of a growth area for Air Inc., and we do want to be mindful. And something I think is really interesting is, California, right? Notoriously expensive, particularly the Bay Area. We have a number of clients in that area, and they have constantly expressed challenges with getting people to move there because of the difficulty of getting into the housing market or cost, availability, whatever. And so, yeah, the lower cost areas are appealing. Remote work is appealing if you can do your job virtually. So it is a moving picture, and we are definitely trying to keep abreast of what's going on in the market and try to meet those needs through lump sum calculators and providing more tailored domestic options to our clients.
Well, thank you for talking about this topic with me off the cuff here.
Sure.
So I'd like you to know about something that we're developing right now for July 8th. Is a conference, virtual conference, much like yesterday's show was organized, several people representing different aspects. So it's July 8th, 9 a.m. start for a couple of hours, and the theme is about U.S. manufacturing redevelopment, if you will. And we have Worldwide ERC as a leader, and Lynn Shotwell will be a featured speaker, and also Rebecca Peters, who's the new VP for Government Affairs, which means lobbying. And we're going to focus in on U.S. bound, U.S. relocation, domestic reloads.
Great.
It's sort of like Back to the Future, isn't it? Beginning to think about where are we going to live in the U.S. or where will people live in the U.S. And you're absolutely right. The companies in the Bay Area couldn't recruit the high-priced talent to leave their nice homes in San Diego to move up to the Valley. So many of the tech companies in the Bay Area have opened up in San Diego, particularly in bio and pharma, and of course tech. But now what we're seeing is a move into Arizona, certainly Vegas area into some products, and of course the North Dallas area.
Yes.
But also, I was talking with others in site selection. Economic development is a pet project of mine, and I'm going to meld it together, and we're going to have some experts on economic development and regional relocation efforts to bring in manufacturing into inland California and different more rural areas around the U.S. where the cost of living is much lower and looks like will remain that way. So I'd like you to be our guest on that show and think about who, if it's not yourself, who I should invite to join the discussion about learning about cost of living in inland areas.
Okay, I'll share that with Michelle.
All right, that's great. Thank you very much for being my guest today on Global TV. We don't know what else to call it, so it's TV. And so that's why we had Robin Hatcha as a media trainer, and she will be coming back and participating in some of our other shows. Because it's obvious that although you and I are used to being on camera, many, many people are not. And, there's certain habits that need to be broken and some new approaches need to be learned. So Inez, Nomidis, thanks very much for being my special guest.
Thank you, Ed. Have a great day.
Thank you and ciao.
Bye-bye.
This is Ed signing off in Big Bear Lake, Southern California, where it's 7,000 feet up, beautiful area. And that was Inez, and she's in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right near Harvard Square. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.